think one of the most beneficial things about my college experience was the fact that I interned every single summer. And by interning, I figured out what I liked to do. And I also found out what I didn't like to do. When I came into school, I was an accounting major. And then I worked at an accounting firm for a summer, and I said, oh no, I cannot do this for the rest of my life. So I think it was just really important to have those experiences. And I feel like, especially as creatives and especially as people on the marketing side and advertising, you learn a lot of great stuff inside of the classroom, but what is really going to speak volumes when you start interviewing and when you're looking for roles is really the type of experience, the ways that you've applied what you've learned in actual work setting, and the stories that you can tell from that work setting that will apply to the next role that you want to move into. So I would encourage everyone to, intern as much as you can. It's a great way of not only networking, which I'm very much a proponent of, but also just learning what you do not want to do and steering clear of that in the future.
I actually have a very, very similar story in terms of what my most beneficial college experience was. I have never considered myself to be an academic. I think as I've gotten older, I've become more and more of an academic mindset in some respects. But certainly, going to school in the UK, unlike in the US, you have to specialise very, very quickly. And so you, at a very young age, you say what you are good at and what you're not good at, which is one of the reasons why I love the American system, because you get a longer period of time to really figure out before you start saying, no, I really can't do that, and this isn't for me. So one of the things about college that was great was, for me, was getting the hands-on practical experience, because I didn't consider myself to be an academic, and I still don't really feel that way, that I am. It's more, I feel like I'm one of those people, and maybe you'll identify with this or not, that learns more when I'm out there interacting with people and I'm getting that hands-on experience. I interned as a graphic designer and realised very, very quickly, as Zoe did, that it wasn't for me, and hats off to people like Kati that are really good at it. I realised that I sucked, and it wasn't something that I should do at all. So it was good to kind of be out there and to be figuring out what I did and what I didn't like from a pretty early point during my college time, and then also just continuing with that, growing, finishing school. There was part of me that as soon as I finished was like, I need to find the career that I'm going to be in and make sure that this is it, because I need to be at this point at this age and at this point at this age. And by the time I was in my mid-20s, I realised that I wasn't, in the career that I thought that I wanted to be in forever. And I kind of just had a reset and a real sort of think about what did I want to do in the future. And I think that continually learning and not putting so much pressure on yourself to have to say, this is what I want to do right now and it's forever. Giving yourself the opportunity to restart and press the reset button every now and then is a really good, the best piece of advice that I can give anyway.
I think compared to the rest of the ladies, I now realize I must have been swinging from tree to tree. Well, I grew up in Malaysia, so I didn't I did my degree in London, but obviously the education system is very different in Asia. We didn't do a lot of internships, maybe they do now, but even when I was studying in London, I would go back to Asia, and I think I only interned a month as an auditor. It was horrible. That was all I lasted. Never did it again. So, one of the things I did that I think really contributed to what I do go back to, the skills that I do go back to every now and again, is with a lot of the repositioning, the rebranding, a lot of things that I do, there's a lot of tactical strategy behind it. There's a lot of planning, there's a lot of structured thinking, and one of the things I think the best decisions I made, and my father now finally agrees, is when I finished my A-levels, I didn't want to go straight into a degree. I took 6 months out, and I did a business vocational qualification, NVQ. Sure. And it was just 6 months. It was almost like learning how to be a secretary. Day one in, lecturer was dictating, everybody flew across the keyboard. I was trying to find A. I had to go back every night and do the typing tutor, but then I have to say, 6 months later, I came out of it with really good, sound, basic business management skills. It's not really about, I think, the secretarial part of it. It was just about, to me, it was training my mind how to sort of just be really methodical in what I do. I still, get to apply all my creativity or my marketing skill sets to it. It's just that for what I do right now, there's just so much planning that goes into it. There's, we're getting ready to rebrand 14 hotels across North America, this. Before we can even plan an internal announcement, there's a lot of background work that needs to be done. So I always think it's good to have a variety of skills because you never know, when you're going to need it.
Thank you. So I think we want to kind of wrap up some of the stuff that they were talking about, kind of summarize some of the stuff that they were talking about. So everybody kind of here mentioned things that they did during their college years, but that were outside of their classroom. And I think that that's very, very important to pay attention to. Everybody graduates with a degree, and I always tell people that are in college this, and people when they're interning, I tell them the same thing. Everybody graduates with a degree, so what sets you apart is everything that you did besides that. And so it's always kind of interesting. I did 4 internships when I was an undergrad as well. I didn't do as much networking, but that's one of the things that I always try to push now, because you see the value of those things later in your careers when you need to get introductions to people, when you need to get shoe-ins into places. And once you start building those networks earlier rather than later, it gives you an advantage to already have some kind of a presence in that industry, in your field. And there's lots of things that you can do while you're still in school that you don't have to wait until you graduate to do. And so I actually spoke at a digital analytics conference a few months back here at NYU as well. And some of the same students that were at that conference are at this conference today. And so I was approached by a few of them earlier today about what else can they do if they're going into marketing analytics. And there's so many things that you can do. Don't wait for it. There's certifications, Google Analytics certifications, the Google AdWords certifications. Those are free to do. You can do those now, and that already gives you a leg up on everybody else. Same thing, creating a website, creating a blog. Those things that you can do those now. You can do this with a Wix, with a Squarespace, even if it's just to play around so you can figure things out along the way. I strongly, strongly encourage you to get involved and get your hands dirty, and not just kind of lean back on what you're learning in class, but actually take the time to put that stuff into practice and see it come full circle. Okay, so the next question. So leaving college now, leaving the college years, what's been the most valuable work experience that you guys have had that has contributed to where you guys have landed now?
So for me, the big shift happened when we started working on a very large integrated content program. The Economist Group had never done anything like it. This was for General Electric, so they were a very large partner. Those of you who are familiar with the Economist Group might know that we have very strict separation of church and state. So our hands were tied and we were still asked to dance a jig. So one of the things that we had to do was we had to produce 2 weeks worth of daily content within about 4 weeks' time. But because we hadn't signed a contract yet, we couldn't actually incur any costs. So we basically got really creative and worked incredibly hard in order to solve a lot of these issues. So this involved collaborating with the sales team, collaborating with the marketers, collaborating with the leadership of the company, collaborating with editorial, and basically figuring out where are the boundaries, what can we do. Okay, we assume that we can't do this, but maybe our assumption is incorrect, so let's test our hypotheses, and sort of iterating and having conversations and working till 1 or 2 in the morning, which I don't recommend, but it sometimes happens. And everyone who emerged from that team ended up doing extremely well at the company afterwards, because we had figured out how to do programs like that, and it became the blueprint for how we run our content, our big integrated content programs. So I would say when the going gets tough, if you're part of the team that is asked to step up, if you get that opportunity, even if it's really hard for a few weeks, do it, because it'll give you the ability to then say, okay, I've actually been in the trenches, and the world has changed. The rules that applied last year don't apply anymore, and I'm one of the first people who knows the new rules. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I feel like I learned most about my job and even my capabilities when I'm going through hard times, when I have a terrible project, when I'm working with terrible people, right? Or people that I just don't get along with, or just are very resistant to change, right? And I feel like you find that, especially in large organizations that have long-standing histories in a certain industry, people sometimes just don't like to move forward or like to work with certain folks. So a couple examples, we were charged with the task of kind of moving an event when I worked on a specific running race. It had been ran on Park Avenue in New York for 30 years, and we had to move it to South Africa. So it's, what are the kind of cultural nuances that I need to be aware of, not only to transition this particular event or project, but just to make it operate and make it happen within a short amount of time. Or again, financial services, we don't, our social media policy was still being instituted. I still can't even access Facebook at work, but I'm charged with, or any social media site, anything. But I, at one point, was charged with developing 12 different social media pages to match the footprint of this specific event, to launch Instagram. How do we get on LinkedIn for this specific property? So how do I do that if I can't access these tools and resources at work? What agency do I need to lean on and help me get this done? What internal stakeholders do I need to work with that don't use social media themselves and are scared of the reputational risk that it brings, especially to a company like Chase? So I find that I have a lot of career definition, I would say, when I come out of these seemingly terrible experiences. So yes, definitely look for the challenges and the stretch assignments. But I think it also, in that specific moment, it helps you figure out what you're really good at, and what you then can apply to the next opportunity.
I think for me, one of the most valuable things that I learned in the workplace was that I can't rely on my job for the inspiration to do my job. And what do I mean by that? When you've worked in a company, or when you've worked in any organization for longer than a year or two, sometimes it's easy to get, stifled and stagnant, and as you're trying to come up with these creative ideas, looking inside is not really where you get those ideas that really are going to take off. So I learned very early on that I need to make sure that I'm engaging in things outside of my work, my 9-to-5 job, in order to create the inspiration for my job. So for example, about 2 years ago, I felt like my creativity needed to be, re-upped, and so I enrolled here at NYU in their digital marketing certificate program. I took 6 courses, and it gave me just completely new energy, completely new ideas, and completely new strategies and tactics to take back to my job. I was lucky to have my company pay for it, but it was something that was, I'm getting the inspiration from other places besides my job. I make sure to read a lot of articles. I'm a beauty and fashion blogger, so I've actually been able to take opportunities or things that I'm doing in my personal life as a blogger and apply it to my company, because I'm also managing influencer relations. So I always tell people to, make sure you're, don't just rely on your job for the inspiration to do your job. Make sure you're looking outside of that, and that's where sometimes the best ideas come from.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. Since I left The Economist 2 years ago to set up on my own, one of my biggest kind of career work experience, and I'm going to say challenges, was being inspired on a day-to-day basis, because I'm often working alone, and I'm sitting at my laptop, and sometimes I don't have that kind of buzz happening around me. So one thing that I've done is recently I joined an organisation called Civic Hall. They're a community that's just launched in New York earlier this year, and they're basically around everything to do with civic technology. And I'm in there 9 to 5 at least every single day. And because of that, I'm constantly engaging with people that work in different industries and different areas, and I'm getting reinvigorated with my own job and re-inspired with what I'm doing myself, because there's different energy around me. And so giving yourself the exposure and ability to meet other people and network and collaborate is, I think, really, really key. If you're like me and you work kind of alone 90% of the time. I will say that picking up on something that Nubia said in terms of challenges and finding your hardest time coming through that and having learned something. Mine, I would say, was last year. I was the program director for the Abu Dhabi Media Summit, and what that meant was having to work with a culture that I really didn't know anything about. I was in Abu Dhabi for a while and working with the government, and I can tell you that was interesting. It was really interesting, and it was an amazing learning experience, and it was tough and it was really hard, and everything that Kati said about going through the projects and stepping up to the challenge when you're confronted with something that's really, really difficult, but getting through it and then realizing on the other side that you've actually taken away from so much. I would say that probably the Abu Dhabi experience was my moment of that in recent times anyway.
I think for me, again, I think because of my background, I find that having lived around the world every time I moved, although the principles were the same, technically the culture's different, industry was similar most of the times, still within travel and tourism in most of my roles. But there was a lot of, as much as I wanted to jump in and do the job, you kind of do have to take that step back and really, know your organization, know your brand, know your customers. And I think being able to, marketing is really about creativity and content, and really engaging your customers and not being able to not being afraid to experiment, right? And that's what I've always told the teams that I worked with. We always try and come up with different. With the hospitality industry, there is a lot of competition. Millennium Hotels, in comparison to the big boys, we call them, is a very, very small group, and so we try and differentiate ourselves by doing more unique things. So I think one of the fun things we did for the group, because hotels are generally being hammered because revenue is not up to scratch and everybody's being having budgets drummed in. It's always about numbers. But one thing we did as a group last year was we brought in a children's program that originated in London. It's called Ask Alfred, and we have a charity partner. We work with Dream Factory, which is the second largest bush granting organization in the US. But when we looked around for partners for for Ask Alfred, it wasn't just going out and getting the big partner because you thought that would give you the better media value, it would give you customer recognition. We actually went out and looked for partners that were similar in size, had the same kind of, what they wanted to do, the objectives that we had, and that's how we became a group. And with launching the program again, we are a much smaller group, so we decided to be a little bit more unique, because it all revolves around Alfred the little bear and a little kid. We don't make any money out of it. It just wanted to be something that we were giving back to our guests. We do donate money for every kid that we sell. We launched it in conjunction with National Teddy Bear Picnic Day. So we launched it at 14 hotels simultaneously. It was a little bit crazy, but every hotel had a picnic party. We had the biggest one in Boston because they had the space. We had the whole Boston Fire Brigade and the whole Boston Bruins band. So everybody had a lot of fun, and I think And I think, it was not just your marketing, you always talk about, your external customers, but really it also needs to be embraced by your internal teams. And by doing that and involving our internal people as well, everybody just, got in on it a lot more and just became part of it.